This game is called Ribbon Drive, and I'm covering up the author's name when I hold up this copy. The author is Avery Alder, but the game was published under a different name. And so Avery is still making the game available. Has a slightly different cover now, and I really don't know if it's undergone any design changes since this original version, which was published in, of course, the CD case format and this little book, and as well as the actually a CD. Because one of the mechanisms of the game is that everybody brings their own mix of songs. Shouldn't be an album. This is very much in the kind of early 2000s hipster mode of you don't listen to albums, you've got your CDs that you've burned and it's got your mixes on it and you put in the mix you want, at any given time, and probably on random play. So anyway, the idea is you show up to play, and we're not going to at the moment. I'm considering, how do we do this in the modern day? This can do anything computer cannot play a CD, for example. That's why would you do that? You don't have a cow catcher on the front of your car anymore either, do you? But anyway. The future has marched on. For the moment, let's just presume that we're doing it the way that it says. So that would mean we would have to have a CD player and everybody would bring a CD with their own mix burned onto it. And you can give it a name, like your own album name that you think it should have on there. And what is this? The game actually has remarkably fixed and known rules for talking. Fixed rules for how to listen to the music, fixed rules for how to play the music, fixed rules for what you can and cannot do with the items on the character sheets and what happens to them when you use them. And the game also has a really focused genre inspiration, almost to the point of fixing what's supposed to happen, which fortunately the design avoids by a whisker. So that actually makes me really want to play it because the rules are really solid. There's no unknown thing about how to play, and for a game which is very open about certain things. For example, while playing, everybody has a character and anybody can do GM type stuff in the course of an imagined situation. There's no one person role for what happens next while we're doing this thing. So there's a lot of, I'd say, wow, it's really loosey-goosey. Everyone just makes shit up. And you're like, well, actually, there's some really un-loosey-goosey stuff in there. Each character has two futures, which simply put are what they're hoping for. That's a little too simply, but enough for our purposes. Each character has a few traits, and they're all on a road trip. So the way it works is through song inspiration. You pick one of the CDs at random, pop it in the player. Everybody shuts up, actually. Really. Don't freaking talk. And listens to the whole first song. And then they start making up characters. And you can use lines or lines inspired by lines in the song for at least one of your things, but there are several things on there. So you have a pretty open thing, but you should kind of be in the aesthetic state of having listened to that song when you make up the character. From this point forward, play occurs. You will continue with that particular CD. So music is always playing while you play. There are some interesting points. You will play, you may not speak, your characters may not speak about the future unless it's one of their listed futures. you've agreed like where you're on this road trip and where you think you may be going or why, but that's sort of okay, so we can get started. Without going into too many more specific details, you will be crossing off. You'll be checking traits, crossing off futures, which means you're not getting that future. That once you've decided you don't want it, it became impossible, whatever. Or you may arrive at one of your futures, in which case you circle it. But one of the important points is when you are encountering somebody introduces obstacle stuff, and when that happens, and there's rules for who can do it, so there is a little more GM-ness in there than it looks. When that is occurring, you can either deal with it by a trait that you've already demonstrated in the scene, or if you don't want to do that, because then you have to check off the trait, or you want to not deal with this in some way, you can detour around it. To detour, you got to change the CD. So there are a couple of other things. When you change the CD, does a scene shift? It might. When a scene shifts, do you change a CD? It might. So scene changing isn't quite this regimented thing, but the mood and the music, when you put in a new CD, you're supposed to listen again. The person who did the shift is allowed to start talking again while that song is running, but they have to wait at least 2 minutes. Or once the second song gets going, then they're able to get going on that. So you may find yourself, zipping through CDs, or you may stick with one for quite some time, and you should be guided by obstacles and what the characters want to do about them. And there's a few other interesting, details about what you can and can't do and how you can and can't talk. But they're real clean. And the net effect, I think, is fairly solid. Thematically, it's real straightforward. If you achieve one of your futures, and you don't really need to drive toward it, it just might work out that way. If you achieve one of your futures, then your character is designated a non-protagonist. They basically effectively become a supporting cast. If somebody in the course of play crosses out both futures, doesn't circle either one, and has negated both futures, then you say, aha, you are the protagonist, and you close out play fairly quickly. You have some ending, some kind of events that handle what was just going on fictionally, and then you close out. You don't have to wrap it up. You don't have to finish the road trip. You might have finished the road trip, 10 minutes in, and now you've either gone to a different destination or all at the destination. All of that is okay. It's not mandated how that should go. So there's this interesting thing. If you've crossed out both futures, you are kind of this, you've let everything go. So you're probably thinking about the road movies that this is based on. There's a whole bunch of them. They're listed in the rules, and you'll recognize those as well as many others. It makes the interesting point that if, for example, everybody has circled at least one future, which would effectively mean the last one would have one future circled, then that's okay. Then it says it's more like an ensemble, different kind of story, where everybody sort of came to their, if you will, fate, or operated in the framework of where they thought the characters was at, and that resolved in its way. So that's one kind of movie. And then the one where one character kind of just gets all, reflective and realizes that what they are and what they wanted and all these things are not what they thought, and where are they now and what will they do? All that's kind of, well, I'm not going to say it's the default. That's one way it can go. But it will go one of those ways. And you're supposed to let it drift away. Let the rest, well, what about my character? No, let it drift away. That's our story. It's assumed to be played in one session, but it's a fairly substantial session that varies quite a lot in length. There's no guarantee of how the players will handle this or where the music will take them or anything of the kind. There are a couple of rules for what happens when a CD ends and stuff like that. It's not over elaborate. It's actually, I think, surprisingly easy, but to do it requires infrastructure. You need the time, you need the space, you need the inclination. Um, and I like it because even though it was published right when the term story game just became the bee's knees, but it really lacks that for something so structured and enclosed in some ways. It really lacks the skit like mannered, overstructured, we're here to do this, we did this, wham, it's over. Okay, look, we made a story because any chimps could make a story if they just follow these rules. That's not really what this game does. It's a little challenging, but it's not actually all that hard. So I've been looking forward to playing it for a long time. As you might imagine, I have any number of lists of mixes that I've got. I've never burned one onto a CD because you're going to laugh at me. I don't know how. So somehow or another, that would have to be accomplished. It's especially fun if everybody just shows up with their CD and they don't even look at them or share them or talk about them. You just pick one at random and pop it in. When it comes time, or if it comes time to put in another, then that's at random too. And it's also, depending on how you want to play, it's up to each player to decide whether they share their character with the others. If two characters who are conceived as lifelong friends, certainly the players should look at each other's sheets. But somebody who says, "Oh, and I'm the guy that has landed in this road trip through nobody's particular desire or planning," no, you don't know anything about them. You'll find out. So there's a lot of potential there. It looks fluffy. It's not. It looks hip. Okay, I'll grant you this. It is hip to the point of waiting in it, but it's looking for what's good in that brand of hipness, which I like. So there you go. I'd like to play that too. If you're interested, let me know.